And we'll go back to the Life First podcast. We're talking about the centers from Reunion Diva and kind of going over some deck lists for it. This is actually one of my spicier deck lists that I put together, and I'm actually kind of proud of myself for this one. I haven't seen anything like this online, and I think it's got some real potential in it. Again, limited testing for this one as well, but I've played quite a bit of green and trying to make green viable itself, as well as talked at length about things that I think green needs to succeed, and Aya does actually give some of those things to green, so I think it can be a strong build, but it needs to be built around correctly. Now, this is a bit of a wacky build. I don't think you've seen anything necessarily like it. There's a lot of people, even on the podcast, I brought up Dance in the Lance with Tiffany, and she had no clue what it was, because it is one of those older pieces that no one really's used. It's from set 5. Yeah, that's where it's from. And I think it's enabled a little bit more too, also because Wishin exists now, which is pretty cool. I like Wishin a lot. I think Wishin is at its best in a mid-range or an aggressive deck where you're always short on cards, and then by virtue of giving yourself a little bit of extra cards, you constantly have a handful ready to go. So let's talk about what Aya Showdown brings to the table. So the particular main thing that I'm trying to work with Aya is, yes, it toolboxes, which is great, right? I do call this deck Maverick. I don't know if you guys have ever played Magic Legacy. Maverick was a green-based toolboxing deck, and this plays very similar to that. It has a pretty good combo that it can pull from its enter zone with its ability. And the ability that I'm talking about here is also specifically target Signy on your opponent's or on your field negates the following ability till end of turn. When the Signy vanishes the opponent's Signy in battle, target up to 1 level 2 or lower Signy from your enter zone. Switches zones with this, so that goes into the enter zone. This comes out of the enter zone into that Signy zone. It's upped so it can attack, and its abilities do not activate. Its enter abilities do not activate. But constant abilities do activate. So let me set you up a hypothetical board situation. Let's go ahead and say that you grab specifically this card from your Rizonas. This card has the ability of when it vanishes a Signy on your opponent's through battle, you can enter charge, which is great. But it also has the ability of whenever the Signy vanishes a Signy on the opponent's field through battle, you up this Signy. The goal, spoiler, is to give this Lancer, so that way it deals damage. It vanishes the opponent through the Signy through battle, you up it again, you get a free attack, you get an extra damage in with this. But that's not what we're targeting with Aya's ability. We're going to be targeting pretty much any other green card that can vanish something in this deck. So let's just go ahead and say we target Flopsy over here. So this Flopsy gets targeted with this ability as well. What we're then going to use is Dance in the Lance to let 2 green Signy on our field gain Lancer till end of turn. This is how we're going to give this Rizona Lancer, and we're also going to give Lancer to Flopsy. We're going to then be able to attack with this, deal 1 damage with the Lancer, attack again with this, deal another damage. Then we've got Flopsy attacks. Flopsy deals a damage because of Lancer. It's going to trigger Aya to activate. Aya is going to go ahead and grab the Parajulius out of your hand, or sorry, your enter. Put that into the field. With Parajulius in the field, even though it doesn't have an enter ability, it now does have an auto ability. You can attack down its open lane with this. Then because Aya is going to, in that scenario, Aya, whenever it sees something switch, is going to give you an enter. It's going to enter charge you 1. Means that you always have Parajulius active. You're going to attack with Parajulius. It'll vanish something 8,000 or less in a different lane. You're going to deal 4th damage. Then your open lane, because it's now you've opened up another lane, is going to deal a 5th damage, and then you are going to swing with your Aya, which is going to deal 6 damage. So that's the combo that we're sort of built around. Now, you can break that combo up into multiple turns if you need to. You can wait until it's appropriate to do it with Dance in the Lance. What's cool about that combo is a lot of the times you're still hitting the opponent for damage, which means that you can actually still kill them with this. So you can use the Lancer that's given in Dance of the Lance to poke a damage in there, lose a life cloth, poke another damage, lose a life cloth, and then you've now have ability to open up 3 different lanes. Those lanes do damage, which means that you can kill the opponent, right? A lot of the time, Lancer decks struggle to kill the opponent because Lancer doesn't actually kill the opponent straight out, unless it's S-Lancer. You've got a bunch of other things that are kind of nice here, too. Polaris doesn't get Lancer in this deck, but it does appreciate the fact that sometimes you want to vanish things out with this. You've got Osagetsune. That does get Lancer and can also open up lanes. You have 4 Churin. You want a little bit of Enter Charge because you do want a toolbox with that Enter later. And likewise, you want Aiyai, Memoria, to be able to pull cards out of that toolbox. Aiyai will always trigger Aiyai's effect, Aiyai level 3 over here, with its effect, which means that's always a pretty safe way to do it. Patra actually is really good in this deck, even though it doesn't necessarily have any wombo combos with that negative 10,000 like it does in Mel. I believe we do actually still run a fair amount of Green Libidor, which you actually can pull out of your Enter to trigger Patra. You can also just pull Patra out of your Enter and trigger your Green Libidor. So there's still some built-in combos there. But this one really does work because a lot of the time I'm trying to avoid grabbing cards from my Enter, especially if I have to pay for it. But it's much less it's much less wasteful with this Aiyai's Center ability of being able to just pull cards. When cards pulled from your Enter zone, you get to Enter Charge, so we basically replace it. I like the Machina Wing Slash and Machina Slash here because again it just ties into the toolboxing spells here. And then again, we do want Enter, so we're going to use Mel Revise here as well as Mel Invisible. And actually is one of the few times that we're going to be pretty happily with double green in our Elrig slots here. It means that we can't run Dream Team Sources, but I think the power of Dance of the Lance is actually powerful enough that doesn't matter. And Wish In as a colorless piece, normally we wouldn't really have anything other than Xenocluster, but I like Wish In because again, that gets us more cards in hand to pull off these wombo combos. Some of the different new cards that we might be running are Barbarian. I think this unlocks just really putting pressure in as a green attacky deck now. We're also going to run a one of Flopsy. I think this is actually pretty cool for Enter toolboxes because not only can it toolbox you with your Enter as well because you can get cards from your Enter zone to your hand, you also can Enter Charge with it, which powers up your toolboxing or your Enter sinks as needed. And then we're running Tamas because giving ourselves Shadow on our turn, Shadow specifically that can stop life bursts on it, is pretty good when we're targeting things and we want them to stick around on the field and not get killed immediately. And the last card that we're using here is Befriending a Master. This actually is at its best in this type of deck because when we pull cards from our Enter, we can go ahead and replace that. It actually targets, I think it's not just on our turn, right? Aiyai triggers on the opponent's turn as well. When Insignia is put into during your turn. Okay, so it doesn't. I just got to clarify myself with there. It still does the effect on our turn if we need to. I really like the life burst on it quite a bit. Being able to put things out instant speed onto the opponent's field is pretty good, especially when you do have like things like Ogana and Anna Mirage that you could potentially put out, as well as Chirin, I guess, to Enter Charge you should you need it. Is pretty good, and it also just gets you more Enter, right? Like this deck, sometimes you'll play this deck, and because of Wish In, as well as Aiyai's ability, especially if the opponent's not discarding us, we'll just have a bunch of excess cards in our hand, and we'll need something to do with that excess cards, and I think Benefiting a Master is a good one to be like, this is excess, let me go ahead and turn this into Enter for myself. And it lets you trigger Parajulius and Osagetsune along with Chirin a little bit later if you don't have quite a way to Enter Charge off of the Aiyai. So I like this deck. I think it's actually really interesting to play. I think it's actually kind of difficult to play. You have to be aware of all the combos that you're going for, which is why I'm spending a little bit extra time on this than not. But if you really have enjoyed green Enter comboing, this is actually kind of a cool sleeper deck, I think, that you could take and win with.